Hello everyone, I am Roa, your local Splatoon interview addict apparently, and I'm joined here with Joy. Joy, say hello.
Hello.
Joy, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Can't complain. It's
Yeah.
80% down, so I don't have a lot to do right now.
Okay, Joy. We've a couple of things that we've said we'd like to talk about. But first, could you introduce yourself so people get a feel for who you are, what you're about, how people might know you?
Yeah, so I'm Joy. On Twitter and on Blue Sky go as Joy the Data Nerd. I function as essentially one of these communities, data analysts, engineers type people. I like to really go into like Splatoon data, see what we can get out of it, insights, interesting things that we can get out of it, maybe build things that are a little unusual. But I really care more than anything trying to uh, see what's in the community and what we can do to improve it in the long term using kind of like data skill sets and data pipelines and all that kind of stuff.
Truly after my own heart, Joy. I think we could sit down and look at the Splatoon census data for far too long together. That's
I would 100% agree. Kindred spirits.
to the listeners. I apologize for procrastinating on that for so long. I'll get to it one day. I promise. Um, Joy, what are some of the like bigger data projects you've worked on in the past that people might have been able to see?
So the biggest one that I had for it was up for a while was Splat.top. And what I did was I tracked the top 500. I would take screenshots every 10 minutes and I put it on a website that was publicly available. So you can see not only progression of X power over time, but also which weapons do some analytics on kind of like the state of the meta on at least a top 500, that kind of stuff. It ended up going down most like the website is still up. You can still access all the data, but Nintendo ended up putting a wrench in the plans so that the way that we collect data is not uh, supported anymore. So data collection has been paused since December of 2024, although it is currently working on getting it back up. And the more recent thing that I worked on was comp.splat.top, which is essentially my attempt to kind of create a individual rankings for players uh, when it comes to like competitive so that they can kind of evaluate where they are, maybe make it easier to like recruit or, not have to rely on uh, divs or plus status or anything like that.
I think comp.splat.top we will have plenty to talk about for it. Going back to splat.top, how long was that going for? What were like some fun insights that you were able to see because of it?
So the original version of the website went up in, I want to say November of 2023. Um, it was very bad. I didn't know how to make a website at all. And I worked on refactoring it, and the website in its current state was launched in April of 2024 or May, something somewhere around there, and ending of April, beginning of May. And uh, there's a lot of really interesting insights. I think my favorite one is that probably a week before the squeezer nerf came out, I was able to like be like, hey, this analytics show that the squeezer is incredibly overtuned, and it wouldn't surprise me if it gets a nerf. And sure enough, a week later, it was hit by the bat, by the nerf bat. Um, some of the other stuff that wasn't really public that I was able to see is when V-Shot got a buff, and people were already complaining about V-Shot. People were really confused, but when I went back and I looked at the data, it was actually underperforming. So it made sense why Nintendo probably looked at it and was like, "Hey, we should probably make this, tuned us up a little bit because it's underperforming compared to like where they would like it to be. So there's definitely some interesting things that are lying in that uh, top 500 data.
Do you think that's how Nintendo like approaches these things? Do you think they take a very data driven approach? I know you can't tell what's in their head, but based on what you've been able to see,
Yes, yeah, 100%. So the one change that to me solidified that it does happen is the ballpoint nerf. So I don't remember the exact ballpoint nerf. I think it's like 1.2 degrees difference in firing um, in the spread. And so that's a nerf that only really makes sense if you kind of treat it in like the aggregate, kind of like, okay, what is the amount of players that die from ballpoint nerf at this range? We want to reduce it by 12% or something like that, right? That to me was the one change that really solidified to me. It's like, hey, Nintendo really is looking at all this data. Like they have clearly a lot of telemetry because this specific nerf doesn't make sense how they would come up with it otherwise. It's so tailored for a very specific situation in battle that I can't see how it would be done otherwise.
I think it makes a lot of sense if you like a lot of the times you'll look at the patch notes when they drop and it can seem very like they can seem semi-random and not following what the populist view would be that such and such weapon is bad or such and such weapon is good. I think it makes a lot of sense that they take a very data driven approach and it kind of wouldn't necessarily match up with just opinion.
Yeah, I actually think that one of the things that interests me a lot about the community is that a lot of the responses to it are a lot of responses to the balance changes that Nintendo makes are kind of knee jerk,
Mm.
which is to be expected in any community. But I think that the thing that's kind of a little odd to me is that it has consistently, not to say that Nintendo's been perfect or anything like that, but like they have been over time you've been able to like see that, oh, okay, they were kind of cooking with this, right? Like they were kind of addressing something where it's not as bad as we thought it would be, kind of like things in that nature. Which is again not to say that they're perfect. They've clearly had a lot of uh, fumbles, but it is very interesting to me that despite their relatively good record, the community will immediately go up in arms about like a buff that they feel was undeserved or like a nerf that they feel was too heavy-handed or something like that.
Mm. I think a lot of Splatoon discourse can tend to be very like day of like patch notes drop. What can we say now? We have to draw. We have to have a side. We have to have a conclusion immediately. And I don't think the I don't think our infrastructure is set up for reasoned debate.
That's a pretty good point. Content creators are definitely pressured to come out with their takes pretty much immediately, especially like high level comp players, because even if they don't like necessarily have a formal platform like YouTube or anything like that, uh, they probably do feel the pressure from like lower level competitive to put out their takes on what they think about the balance nerfs rather than kind of taking a wait and see. It's like let's test it out, let's see if it's really as bad, let's see if it's better than we think it is, that kind of thing.
Taking a step back a bit, we mentioned earlier like player rankings. What made you so interested that you committed a lot of time to building comp.splat.top?
So one of the things that's kind of always been interesting to me has ever since I came back to the community in 2022 is that I noticed that results culture was everywhere. Like one of the first things that I saw was like a tweet that was somebody complaining about getting resulted uh, from an X battle, which is a little ridiculous. But to me, it was interesting that why would somebody even do that? And so, like, this has been something that's been kind of like ruminating in the back of my mind for a while, just kind of, building up a slow simmer. But it wasn't until I want to say like 3 months ago that Samino was like, hey, were trying to get some rankings, that I was kind of like, well, I've had this idea for a while, and it kind of gave me like the push to finally like try to actually address this issue. So a big part of that was trying to identify what the root cause is. And so I don't want to like I guess railroad over you, but like um, the root cause, in my opinion, is just that because Splatoon is tournament driven, it makes it very difficult for players to be able to judge each other's skill level for a lot of reasons. So for one, uh, not every player is going to join every tournament. Um, Two, we don't really have any good spectator tools. And so like most matches aren't streamed. So it's very difficult to find out, how good a player is because, it's only more recently that there's been like a concerted effort to compile replay codes. But even then, I don't think that most people would take the effort to do that. Like really, we would need like a video um, compilation project or something like that. But there's no real way for players to be able to identify how good other players are. In other games that are league based, this isn't really a problem because if you're like in, let's say, Silver League or tier 3, tier 4, that it could be very safely assumed that that's about the skill level that you are. And if you want to go up or go down, or really go up, then you really have to prove yourself by being like at the top of your tier. Uh, but that's not something that we have in Splatoon. Splatoon, because it's tournament based, because not everybody attends every tournament, because it's difficult to view uh, matches. It's very, very difficult for the player base to actually understand how good other players are. So that ends up being a huge vacuum, right? Because one of the most important things about team games is that you want to have people that are around your skill level, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure that there's some people that want to be carried, but that carried person doesn't want to carry other people. Um, so there's like this incentive to try to, minimize the skill difference between all the players in a team. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. So like, if you're friends, it doesn't really matter too much, like if there's a big skill difference, anything like that. But generally, in this competitive, I guess in this competitive Splatoon community, that's kind of like what's incentivized. But because it's so difficult to be able to identify skill level, the only real thing that you can do is kind of like have a resume, right? Like, hey, these are my accomplishments.
Hmm.
But because tournaments only really have a few winners, right? There's only like three places that people really will realistically will consider it to be notable. Um, the the problem there is that people still need to be like, hey, well, I haven't won any tournaments, but I have some pretty good sets where we did really well, right? Like against this other team. And so that's kind of like what ends up leading to results culture. It's the fact that there's like this need for players to be able to prove themselves, but the overall competitive environment makes it almost impossible to be able to do that. So I know that a lot of people complain about results culture, but I don't really see it as like an issue that people like it's not like people being dumb or anything like that.
Hmm.
It's really like the only solution that exists.
And Joy, people like hearing you say all this might think, oh, but we do have ways in the community to clarify people's skill. We have Ludi divs. We have X power. What do you think about those systems makes them inadequate in different ways for fulfilling the role of kind of a community ranking system?
So I think that Ludi systems are actually really, really good, and I think that the seeding um, team has done a really great job. The problem is that when Ludi's not running, those old divisions kind of go stale. And one of the things that people complain about a lot is like, well, you say that you're estimated Div 5, but what does that mean? If your last Ludi, you were Div 8, right? And so the problem that it has is not quality, it's more that the rankings become stale the moment that they come out, right?
The refresh
Like
rate is low.
yeah, it's very low and things get stale immediately, right? Like in data, there's this staleness problem, which is, the moment that you post the data, it starts to become stale, right? It's like food. And eventually, it just is no longer relevant to the community, right? So during really long breaks between Ludi, that's when like the div system is like all over the place, right? People estimate like all over the place. People complain about people estimating their divs. So that's really the issue there. And for X Power, I know that a lot of top players like to have recently been saying, well, we should do X Power the way that Japan is doing it. But the problem is that Japan has the same problems because the problems are inherent to, being a tournament-based system as well as not having any transparency into the actual matches themselves, right? Um, so X Power is like their attempt of a solution for trying to figure out how good players are. Is it really effective? I would assume that it is sort of effective at least, but I don't really have any insight into like the lower levels of Japanese competitive. Like at top levels where they're like 4K XP, 5K XP, like they are very clearly, effective there. But like, how does it translate to low level, to like the Japanese equivalent of low ink? I don't really have any insight into that. And I don't really see almost anybody in the community really even thinking about that kind of stuff. Like I've never even seen it discussed like, hey, how does the Japanese low level community even work? Is there a low level community? So it's also an attempt. I don't think it's necessarily better or worse than the attempts that we have with result culture. But to me, that's still kind of like not necessarily fulfilling the player needs, right? Like, because I'm in the old person like Splatoon server, and one of the things that I've noticed there is that a lot of the players there, uh, they will prefer to play Anarchy with their friends, or they will play competitive. So they don't really play X at all. They don't have the time to do that. Um, and so it's like, well, if it's XP that you're using, right, for like, let's say, um, low ink bands or anything like that, then these players that don't really play XP, well, they go under the radar. There are people that aren't going to be tracked. How do you even tell how skilled they are? Especially when, at least in our community, skill cap tournaments are incredibly popular. They're probably the most popular type of tournament that isn't open. So yeah, it's just, I guess to preface this, I don't think that my solution is necessarily perfect either. I think ideally players should kind of take a little bit of information as they can, right? Like a little bit of X power, to a little bit of like what results they have, and try to make like this decision for like tryouts and all that kind of stuff based off of all of the information that they can get. The problem, of course, then being that it's a lot of work. So yeah, I know that I'm just kind of like bringing up like extra problems that come with this, but it's a lot more of a nuanced and difficult issue than I've seen it really discussed.
I think when you were speaking there, you brought up like um, the like people engage with this behavior because it is like it's seen as the right thing to do. It's seen as the way to get yourself out there. It's seen as the way to make a free agent post to get on a team. And I think that in conjunction with the popularity of skill cap tourneys, I think they feed off each other a lot. I think I think there's skill cap tourneys because people want a result to put on their resume. And I think we put results on the resume because there's so many skill capped tourneys that like it creates this loop of like, oh, I won Little Junior Cup 1. Oh, I won Little Junior Cup 2. And then that goes the whole way up.
Yeah, and then the problem then becomes like there's so many tournaments. It's like, well, I don't know anything about this tournament, right? Like I like unless you're super plugged into the community, you know, you might not know the actual skill level that the tournament themselves are going for. So it's an information problem at its core, right? Like these players don't have enough information, and there isn't a way to get that information, but it involves sorting through so much, trying to get so much knowledge and trying to understand, the context of these, this tournament and these players and all this kind of stuff, that it's very difficult, right? And you'd rather spend that time playing the game and getting better at it than, trying to, optimize recruitment or, anything like that.
So then, how do you go about actually creating a system like what you've created? So describe to me what like more in depth what it is, how it works, and then how did you create it?
So, I guess again, to like preface, I don't think that it's perfect. I do think that there's like a lot of issues that I'll get into afterwards, but essentially, one of the things that I thought is important is we have a lot of information. Ever since the community moved over to sendu.inc or sendao.inc, I'm not sure how people like to pronounce it, but um, we have this information readily available. Like it's all there. So what that means is that we can definitely apply data analytics techniques, because now we have information about matchups. We have who beats who, what team they were on, that kind of information. And so that stuff is really important. The other thing too is that um, I was partially involved a little bit with the initial rollout of SP for Sendu um, Sendu queue, and so I analyzed it and made sure that things were stable and all that stuff, and it looked really nice. It's actually still my pinned tweet on Twitter because I'm really proud of that analysis. But it seemed to work really well. But the problem is that doesn't necessarily transfer really well to tournaments, and the reason for that is because players will play a lot fewer tournaments than they do Sendu queue. Sendu queue doesn't have that issue because people play a lot, right? And uh, tournaments is not really necessarily the case, because while they might play a lot of tournaments, many players have ranked anxiety and they would rather play unranked tournaments. So that kind of makes it so that the SP doesn't perform as well as it could for tournaments. So the main issue that I was trying to address is like, okay, if this type of ranking system, which SP is built off of, doesn't necessarily work as well as it could because of the low data problem, there has to be another way to evaluate it. Uh, so I kind of reached into like my bag of tools, and there are algorithms that definitely let you incorporate more uh, context for every single match. So the way that it works with Sendu queue, for example, is if you play a match, right? You have your score, you have the teammate scores, and your enemy's scores. What the system does is it predicts which team is going to win. And then based off of the actual result, it'll either give you more points if you win and you were predicted to lose, or it'll give you less points if you win and you were predicted to win. The same in reverse with the losses. If the prediction is correct, the point delta changes, it's increased. If the prediction was correct, the point delta decreases. If the prediction is wrong, the point delta increases. And so the problem with that is that it doesn't really care about your history. It doesn't care about matchups. It doesn't care about anything. It's literally just the numbers. It reduces players down to those numbers and calculates, updates based off of that. This is really efficient for matchmaking because it doesn't take a lot of, mathematical computations here. But it means that it requires a lot more data to actually work, and it requires consistent data. So I kind of just ended up being like, okay, well, is there a way to incorporate all of that matchup history? And that's what I attempted to solve with comp.splat.top. The number that comes out there is just kind of like the way that it works is like everybody starts with like a certain voucher, right? Like let's say you can think of it like money, right? Like let's say everybody starts with $100. Every single match that you have, you bet, a little bit of that money, and the better you are, so like the more money you have, the bigger you bet, right? So like whenever Gray plays against Kyo, uh, you end up big point transfers because these players are like betting a lot because they have a lot, right? Whereas, very low level players, they don't really have a lot of score to bet. So like they bet smaller amounts. And so it just kind of goes through these iterations. It's like, okay, every single match that you've done here, and you win or you lose, it transfers money over. And it simulates this for like thousands of times. And at the end, it's like, okay, who has the most money, who has the least money, and everybody in between. And that ends up being a pretty good proxy for skill level, right? Um, I don't know if that's clear. If you want me to
No, I think
simplify
that's
it a little bit more.
I think that's a good explanation. When it comes to like how do you find the different tournaments, the different things that would influence a person's power, or big number go up, big number go down on Splat.top.
Yeah, so the way that essentially it grabs everything from Sendu. Um, it just grabs information on like all the tournaments. I go through every single day at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. It'll scrape and it'll be like, okay, well, what tournaments just completed? And once they complete, it grabs all the information for those and updates like the big web of matchups and then computes that. Um, so it constantly updates, which solves the data staleness problem. Um, the the other thing too is that how does it figure out what like how strong I guess players are? It just kind of like it kind of bootstraps. So it like starts everybody starts off equally, and then it just kind of like sees how far it goes. It's actually a lot more complicated under the hood, but it just kind of like always rebuilds from zero, right? Like a new tournament comes in, it starts over the entire process. It doesn't just like update player scores. I make it look like it's updating the scores, and it's like, oh, you got 1 point or something like that. But in reality, it's literally doing an entire, universe simulation over again, and just checking the difference between the last score and this score. Um, but
Interesting. So it's less so like when you win a Sendu game, or like people might be familiar with like similar ranking systems like ELO for like chess or whatever, where you win game, you get plus whatever. But in reality, what it's doing is it's like keeping track of all of the games this person has played and then rerunning a simulation of how good they are.
yeah, exactly. And so this actually solves a few problems. The first one I like to call the Magnus Carlsen Smurf problem, where it's like if Magnus Carlsen creates I guess for any listeners that don't know who Magnus Carlsen is, he's the best chess player in the world by far. Some people consider him, might even be the best of all time. Um, if he creates like a new account on chess.com and he uh, just blazes through the rankings, if you happen to play against them, you will lose a lot of points, right? Like you might be ranked really highly and his new account is very low. You're going to lose a lot of points because the system is going to expect that you're going to lose or that you're going to win. Because, I mean, you're only looking at the numbers. You're not taking any context into that account. There's no way for the system to know that that's a really strong player. So you end up losing a ton of points. And this is kind of like what's going to happen no matter what as he goes up. What my system is able to like do here is that over time, as the system realizes this player is actually really good, it'll start refunding points because it'll be like, well, you might have lost that game 2 months ago, but we've realized that he's a very top player. So that loss that you had doesn't actually hurt you as much as it used to.
Interesting. I
So
see. Okay. So because because the system has now learned, oh, this person's a god, then that loss gets recalculated given like the player's new perceived goodness.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's such
And
an
so the other
interesting
thing
way
that
of
it
doing it.
Yeah, the other thing that it does really well is that if you have, let's say, a double elimination tournament, and you haven't played tournaments, you and your team haven't played tournaments in a while, and you decide to join the open tournament, and you play your team A, and you're playing against team B. Team B has done the exact same thing. They haven't played tournaments in a while, but they've also improved a lot. When you play team B, if you beat them, but then Team B goes through losers brackets and wins everything else, even if you lose your next match, so you basically only end up finishing that tournament beating Team B, you end up getting credit for that because it will take into account the fact that B defeated all these other players, all these other teams to win that whole thing. And so you defeated them. So by transitive property, you should be good enough to get some points for that. So it takes full context of everything that you kind of like see. Um, Granted, this isn't perfect because, like I mentioned, there's ranked anxiety. So players don't like to play unranked. And especially at the lower levels, the system doesn't perform really well because these players don't like to play games, these ranked tournaments, so they don't have enough results for the system to actually incorporate them correctly. So it might have like, they might be placed a lot higher or a lot lower than they otherwise would be. So that the accuracy goes all over the place. The other issue there is that there's no real way to incorporate confidence scores because the system, since it makes these simulations, it doesn't really have a a range where players will fall into. It's just like that's the number.
Because
The
it doesn't
number is
have like a
also kind of
memory,
like,
right? It's just kind of this is the world now.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really have a way to do that. But yeah, it's an attempt. But more than anything, it's really just trying to get players more information about, to deal with like recruiting or free agent, anything like that, because I used to play competitive, back in the day, and one of the things that was definitely annoying was trying people out because, like, if you try them out for like a scrim, that might be an hour that you're wasting, or that you're investing in this person, and if this person, if you don't have enough information, and this person turns out to be a complete dud, you just burned an hour for nothing. And so that kind of stuff really hurts. It makes the community more toxic because these people are justifiably annoyed on both ends, right? Like you might try out for a team that is a lot worse than they represented, and you might be annoyed because they're like, well, I don't want, I'm a Div 4 player. Why would I, try out with a Div 6, Div 8 team, right? So it's, I guess it's like really just seeing why these issues come up and try to minimize toxicity in whatever way is possible. And at least for me with my skill set, that is kind of like the attempt there, right? Trying to be like, hey, this might not solve the problem, but it might alleviate it, might reduce your annoyance by, I don't know, 30% or something like that, right? If you could quantify annoyance.
Do you think do you think there's we've talked like a fair bit about results culture here, and we've talked about like a little bit about some of the issues with it. Do you think this I suppose it's a double question in the sense, do you think this does a good job at solving, not solving, but attempting to at least improve the issue, and then to what degree do you think it's like a major issue in the community?
So as to what degree does it solve it? I don't know. Mostly because it doesn't really mean anything without having any type of like adoption, right? Or like at least feedback. And I haven't really gotten much feedback except from like some top players that kind of have been using it to try to, push higher and higher. But it, I would like to be able to improve it to kind of like address this issue as to how big of an issue it is. I think that it is bigger than people suspected it is, mostly because uh, it ends up having like a lot of like secondary and tertiary effects. So, for example, if like um, because of results culture, if I'm a top player, why would I play a for fun tournament with my friends if I know that there are people that are going to take that as a win and put it on their, you know, profile without any context, right? They're going to be like 3-0. You know, I have to try hard every time. I have to sweat. I don't think that that's a healthy perspective of the community because now you're going to have, you know, maybe not all top players, but now you're incentivizing there to be some contempt between top players and low level players, right? Kind of like split the community because like, well, why would I have respect for these people if I can't even play the way that I would like to if they're just going to use that against me, right? They're going to use, you know, their win against me. Similarly, it does encourage low level players to be like, yes, I beat this person. I'm so awesome. I'm so great. And like, that doesn't feel good, right? Somebody gloating about your defeat sucks. So I do think that it does have more tack on effects than is probably acknowledged, uh, which is kind of like why I focus so much effort onto this. Because this is like a novel algorithm. Like I literally, you know, built this from scratch. There isn't anything that I've seen like it, um, and it's because I think that it's a really big issue. Um, I think that it leads to toxicity. It leads to like resentment. I and I don't think that those things are positive.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think I've felt like parts of what you're describing were like sometimes you might not want to play in a tournament because like oh if I'm not going to be trying my best then like what if someone comes along and is like aha 5-0 Roa aha or the kind of the reverse of that where it's like you beat someone in a tournament and they're a known player. People like have respect for that name, and you were able to beat them, but you know that they were using a meme comp. You know that they're you know that they're just messing around and they're not trying their hardest, and this is just like a chill out like tournament for them. It's like what do you do then? It's kind of I think it's one of those ideas where if you think about it for 1 second, results culture makes sense and it seems fine. And then you think about it for 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then you start to immediately see how it can have some pretty nasty effects that kind of make the culture around it not nice.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that, you know, in that example, it's like you beat this team, you know, this player that's like really well known, and you know that they're doing a meme comp. You're still incentivized to put that on your results, right? Like
Right.
because you're like, you know, you might like everybody always thinks that, you know, they minimize their losses and they overstate their victories. So they might be like, well, you know, my current results don't necessarily reflect where I feel like I'm at. And so even though this is a team and I understand that it was like a meme comp, I do think that it is worth putting on here, especially if I know that other people are going to be doing that as well. You know, so it ends up being kind of like the resume inflation, you know, credentials inflation problem where it's like people overstate what they did
Hmm.
so that they can be competitive in resumes, you know, because that's really what you know looking for players is, right? You're essentially an employer looking for for an employee, and your free agents are people that are sending in their resumes. It's the exact same problem there. So you have these incentives that are uh, not really getting addressed, and I mean I don't blame it, right? Like the community trends young, so it's something that is not super obvious, like the whole system and how it like everything interconnects. So it's just it's something that I started like really focusing on because I do think that it is a bigger issue than what how it's discussed would suggest.
Do you think for all the free agent posts that Splatoon players make, they'd have an easier time filling out a job application? Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, they probably would. Like that is basically it is basically experience on filling out a job application.
Uh-huh. For sure. Okay, I think we've covered a lot. We've had some really interesting topics brought up. Um, I really appreciate the time you've given and the insight you've been able to provide.
Yeah, sorry I went over. I know that I rambled like an old man.
You're
Um,
good.
but
I think it
but
was
yeah,
for better
it's been a pleasure.
that we yapped a little longer. Where can the people find you, Joy?
On Twitter, I'm Joy the Data Nerd, and I'm also that in on Blue Sky. Easiest way to find me.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Uh, Not really.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks again for your time. I'll leave you to it. It was nice chatting.
It was nice chatting to you too. You're a very good interviewer.
Oh, thank you. With the glazing, I'll leave it there. Bye bye, guys. Thanks for watching.